Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, it's Padders here and you've tuned in to PaddersReviews. Today I'll be looking at the game named Party of Sin. This game was released on the 13th of December 2012 and is an action puzzle platformer game. The game was created by Crankshaft Games, whose previous creation was an award-winning mod called Eternal Silence. This was a mod for Half-Life 2 and won the award in 2009 from the website moddb.com. Bearing that in mind, I had high hopes for this game, as clearly the developer knows how to develop a modification at least for the PC. So now we know what the game is, let's look at the options menu. Unfortunately this time there isn't a great deal on offer. There is the resolution option, which is always nice, and the sound effects and music sliders, which are standard. Apart from that, there are some checkboxes for multi-sampling, collecting stats and constraining the mouse. While these are quite nice, the options menu is missing three major functionalities, and these are windowed mode, rebindable keys and graphics options. While the game is not particularly system heavy on the graphics side, it would be nice to be able to edit the graphical options, as it should be standard for any PC game. The rebindable keys becomes a major issue, as part of the game's mechanics have you switching between 7 characters on the fly. So really this should have been functionality that should have been developed for the game in mind, bearing in mind the PC user usually uses a mouse and keyboard. And while the constraining the mouse is an option that I like, it confuses me that they would offer this option but not also offer the option of the windowed mode, as it seems the two would work as a pair much better, as most users who use a single monitor would like to constrain and unconstrain their mouse based on the window that they're using. So unfortunately it's not off to a great start looking at the options menus. And oftentimes what the options menu offers is quite telling of how much the developer cared about their PC audience. There are some good points to this game, as all games have some good characteristics. The story is kind of interesting, for a little while, and although it doesn't get into quite enough depth, in my opinion, it does help set the scene for the game. Next is the artwork. Some of this is really nice, especially in the background and for the models of the Sims. The graphics are cartoony and this really fits with the type of game on offer. There is some replayability as well in this game, allowing for changing of the abilities when apples are collected, and the time attack mechanic really helps for extending gameplay. The upgrades are a nice feature, but if you don't use them, the game isn't any harder. But there are some silly little extras that only change the character's look, or some cheats which either help or make the game harder as you go through and replay the adventure. These are fun, and they do extend the gameplay. The final positive is the music. This really gets into some rock and some metal when things really get hectic, and is actually a really great addition to the game when it worked. The next part I'll be looking at are the parts of the game that didn't hit quite so well. First of all are some of the textures, especially for the foreground, are just ugly. The whole game doesn't have high fidelity graphics, but these don't look cartoony. In fact, they don't fit in the whole aesthetic of the game. They also look as if the textures might have been left out from the alpha stage of the game. The next negative might just be my computer. After about 30 seconds of the music playing, there is a massive frames per second drop, then the music stops and the game continues. Now this is really detrimental, as the music was one of the best features for this game. The soundtrack is amazing, so I'd definitely have a look at picking that up as well. The next problem is the game length. It took me 3 hours to complete the game, and I like to spend my time looking for everything in the level. I even saw one speedrun that finished the game in 1 hour. Even for a speedrun, that's exceptionally short. While watching the speedrun, I even picked up on the fact that this wasn't a perfect run. This was just a guy who'd played the game a couple of times and thought he'd get a speedrun out to show how short the game really is. The final problem is perhaps the largest problem that I have with the game, and that's the problem with some of the mechanics. The game has you actively jump between the 7 sins, and the lack of rebindable keys really has you tripping over your own fingers to try and make this game work. The next mechanic is the local only co-op, and while I'm not one to criticise an indie developer too much, what I will say is that the developers actively said that this game was not for multiplayer co-op, and they were having local only co-op because the game had been made for griefing. That's what the developers said. While this doesn't sell the game, that's not my major bugbear. That comes in the form of the game seeming that it either has come out too soon and requires a lot of polishing, or the developers decided that the game's shortcomings can be forgiven because it's more fun to play with a friend. A lot of games are more fun to play with a friend. Most of the successful local-only multiplayer games don't use this as an excuse not to fully flesh out the mechanics. For the single player, the puzzles were too easy, the action was not fleshed out enough, was a little bit boring, I would say. The only feature of this game that could inject some fun would be another player. In conclusion, this game is heavily flawed. There is a lot of competition in the indie market, especially for puzzle platformers, and this game falls short of a lot of the competition. I played a lot of this game to get a feeling for the game, and after 6 hours I found myself bored out of my mind. This isn't surprising, as after 6 hours you can be bored of a lot of puzzle platforms. However, with this game I was bored after the first hour. The game lacks features for the single player to be good, and the mechanics were not polished enough in my opinion, and the whole game was not polished enough. If you are looking for a puzzle platformer where you switch between the characters on the fly, I would suggest buying Trine 2 for the same price, or even getting the first Trine, which is a more polished game for half the price. This game might be worth picking up if you have 2 or more Xbox controllers and also have a couple of friends to play with. Apart from that, I couldn't recommend picking up this game to anyone else. Thanks for watching. My name has been Padders and you've just watched Padders Reviews. The next game I'll be looking at is a game called Bastion. This is an action RPG and it's made by Supergiant Games. Definitely worth checking out. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.